I had a hobby too. Mine happened to be guns and ballistics, and I studied guns and ballistics as much as I could, and I wrote an article about high velocity.
So out of all my years working at Weatherby, the last 5 have been some of the most exciting. Working with Adam, with him running the company.
And to think that I get the opportunity of carrying on my grandfather's legacy 75 years later here in Sheridan, Wyoming, I mean, it really is a dream come true.
Oh, I'm home. Thank God I'm home.
On Our Mark, the Weatherby Podcast.
All right, welcome back to On Our Mark, the Weatherby Podcast. And I'm Luke Torkeldson, your host today. I'm joined by Tyler, who has a last name.
It's Grayton, so that's how you pronounce that.
I wasn't going to go there, but I kind of
It's been a couple of episodes since you called it out.
Yeah, I skipped it for a while. Also, we've got Jared.
Howdy.
Jared, what's your last name? What do you do here?
Smethurst. So, kind of a bummer last name.
That's a great last name.
Hard to spell.
Don't beat yourself up, dude. Why would that be a bad last name?
If like, I envy people who it's like Smith, and you're like, oh, I know
My last
I
name
know
is Torkeldson.
That's true. Like, you and I are in the same boat.
The first time I've ever heard his pronounced correctly was right now.
Oh,
I
yeah.
never knew what that was.
Yep,
Yeah.
Grayton for sure.
The very first podcast that he was on, I totally butchered it. I was like, and I knew it, and as soon as I said it, I was like, son of a gun.
I think on that one you couldn't decide
like
if
when
you
you-
wanted to call me Grethen or Grayton, so I think you said Grayton.
Yeah, I got it just wrong. But it's spelled, if you're just reading it, it's Grethen. Like,
Yeah.
no question.
Yeah.
Like, I'm big on phonics.
No.
Not big on phonics. Then, Jared, you've been on a few times. And
Yeah.
It's a joy. Usually we're talking about very technical things when you're on,
Usually.
which we're going to do a little bit of that today. And then we've got Keaton. I'm just not going to say anybody's last name today, so you can do your own.
Lions, and I am the ballistician here at Weatherby.
I like it.
That's
So-
cool. So do you think that's a cool last name? I mean, Lions is kind of cool,
It's
right?
a pretty awesome last name.
Yeah.
Lions,
It
Bears.
actually is cool. That's probably of all of us. That's
Definitely.
You're the great hen, or
The great
I mean,
hen,
I
yeah.
think the lion would eat those hens.
Not if we fly away quickly.
All right, this is lame. Okay, there's an announcement that's going to come out like right before or like right when this podcast comes out.
Yeah, the day this podcast launches, you should people should be aware.
So if you don't already know, Weatherby is going to do something that we've never done before, which we're going to begin loading cartridges that are not Weatherby cartridges, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, you got something on that soundboard to get excited about that because it seems pretty cool.
You're fulfilling your destiny.
That's the best one, I guess. But so we've got 16 proprietary cartridges that we load pretty much exclusively here at Weatherby. And through the pandemic, I think we're probably one of the few ammo companies that could say, I think there were obviously some accounting term puts and takes on like what was available or not as far as projectiles go. But like if you needed to get 300 Weatherby or you needed 257 Weatherby, it was available for the most part in some projectile throughout the pandemic. We really scaled up our loading capacities here. We got 3 loading machines now. We've got a dedicated priming machine. Keaton, you and your team have gotten really good at loading consistently for Weatherby. And so when we found out that we could potentially get some, what I'll just call non-Weatherby brass from some of our brass partners, we're like, hey, what if we started loading stuff that wasn't Weatherby on our machines? So we put a plan in place, and we're announcing that plan now. So, Keaton, tell us about what we're loading.
All right, so kick us off here. We've got all 3 of the PRC families. We got 6.5, 7, and 300 PRC going out the door. So that's super exciting. Those are really popular cartridges in the last few years. I feel like they're really taken off.
And those are going to pair really well with our new Model 307 because we're chambering those.
Correct.
Yeah.
As well as the 280 Ackley, which has been in really short supply. I have not seen that ammo on the shelves forever.
I'm not sure anybody has.
Yeah, I don't think so. You're about to, though.
That's right.
And we also have the 28 Nosler coming out as well. So we picked some hot rod cartridges that we thought were pretty cool, and we've got some pretty cool bullet options to offer them as well.
Yeah. So what you'll probably not see us load, I don't know, 308 or
30-06.
30-06.
Yeah.
But cartridges where we feel like we can compete in the overall marketplace because we don't make an ammunition component. We don't make brass. We don't make a projectile. We're just a loading house. So we're not going to be able to compete on price with the big guys that are running hundreds of thousands of rounds of a more generic cartridge. But these more like niche cartridges that are similar to Weatherby cartridges make a lot of sense for us because we can use the premium projectiles that we already are loading and our other Weatherby cartridges and start dropping these into these, let's just internally we were started referring to as non-Weatherby cartridges. So bullet offerings. We've got a unique strategy here. I think it's a good strategy because to my knowledge, every single projectile that we are loading is not available commercially loaded today.
I think you are correct there. I think we've kind of hit the nail on the head with offering everybody something a little bit new. Yeah, some of these you're never going to see on the shelf loaded by anybody else as well because they're exclusive to us.
Yeah. So, Jared, give me the rundown. Let's start with 6.5 PRC. What bullets are we offering there?
Alrighty, so 6.5 PRC, we've got the 124 hammer. So that's a hammer. Hammer Hunter. Yeah,
Yep.
but it's a custom weight for us, and yeah, pretty awesome.
It's the same bullet we loaded in the 6.5 RPM.
Yep.
Ballistically is very similar to the 6.5 PRC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yep.
pretty close. And then we also have the 130 Scirocco. So that's your great hunting bullet, bonded lead core. And then we also have the 156 Burger. So super high BC. So we kind of like cover all our bases with what we've offered with being able to whatever you want to do, whether it's super high BC, you're really reliable hunting, or just like super accurate hammer. We kind of got you covered.
We've really kind of fallen in like with these hammer bullets. So you're going to see a hammer offering in every single one, and you're going to see basically a Scirocco offering in every one of these 5 non-Weatherby cartridges that we're talking about. So what about the 280 Ackley?
Yeah, so that one we've got the 139 hammer and then a 150 Scirocco. And then, so kind of the same deal. You got your really awesome, accurate hammer that's a little bit different, and then bonded Scirocco there. And then on your 28 Nosler, we have a 163 hammer, so getting a little bit higher up in there in the grain weight, and with a 150 Scirocco also.
Still pushing really fast, though, too, on those Noslers.
Yeah, instead of getting into crazy number soup here with every velocity, make sure you go check out weatherby.com. There's going to be a page that has all of these velocities on there. But I would say for these cartridges, we're going to be probably we're competitive, but I would even say probably on the higher end of the spectrum, especially with the hammer bullets, because typically the hammer are light for caliber.
Yeah, light for caliber, then also really the bearing surface on them. If anyone watching it, you guys should dig into hammer bullets. They're pretty cool. So they have grooves basically cut on the side, and I guess we interviewed we had hammer podcast.
We had the hammer guys on. We talked about it.
Yeah.
If you're going through the ammo website, that podcast will be linked at the bottom of product pages now, just because we get so much interest in those hammers.
I was actually talking to somebody recently that was like, hey, do you know that if you put some extra oil in the tip of the hammer bullets, your vapor trail will be out of this world?
So we actually tested that out.
Did you?
Do you remember that back when we first started running hammer bullets?
Yeah.
So they're a solid lathe cut bullet. So
they use cutting fluid or cutting
the
oil.
cutting fluid was residual from the process of making the bullet. We discovered that was in the tip on some of them and not, and we've actually eliminated the oil out of the tip now.
Right.
But we didn't see a big difference with that trail. It seems like that's just what those bullets do. I don't know why, but
Come on, I was sure that it had to be the oil.
can't confirm or deny it was more, because it is a crazy vapor trail that these bullets leave.
Yeah.
But,
I was talking to a guy that he was talking about like using like a fine like pipette dropper type thing to put more oil in the tip, so you have an even more enhanced vapor trail.
We could try that out.
I think we need to try it.
Yeah, you've been in the camp that it's been the oil the whole time.
I have. From day one, that was my theory.
Yeah,
They-
for sure.
Yeah, I think they put them in like a centrifuge now and spin out the oil.
Yeah, I for us they do. I don't know if they do that for everybody. We were having some issues with our loading machine because it was like some bullets were oily and some were not. And for consistency, which I want to talk about in a second, that wasn't good. So you want to eliminate as many variables as possible. So where did we leave off? Did we go through all of them?
I think we're
7 PRC.
Yeah.
So 7 PRC, we have the 177 hammer, and then also 150 Scirocco too. So, and for those who do not know, so a 7 is a 28. So 28 and a 7 are a shared caliber. So they're .284 inch in diameter. And so I feel like every time I talk about calibers, people are like, oh yeah, well, the 7s, and they don't realize it's the same as a 28 or vice versa. So same with the 280 actually. So
It's good. It's a good point to bring up, even though it's 280 and not 284. The 280 just sounds cleaner, I guess.
that's true. That's what we do all the time, though. Like 340, and it's like, oh, well, that's bigger than the 338. I'm like, oh, no, it's the same.
It's the same.
Yeah.
240s, we went down. Don't know why.
I
Could have
know.
been a 243.
Yeah. And then 300 PRC. So we have a 195 hammer and a 180 Scirocco. So, yeah, awesome, good hunting bullets. And then also, the 195 hammer, I actually shoot that on my 300 Weatherby, and that is amazing.
Yeah, super amazing. I shot an elk when we were first doing testing with that 195 hammer out of 300 Weatherby, and it's a mean mamma jamma. Keaton, we were talking earlier because you were trying to like get info from me about what are we going to talk about in the podcast. I'm like, I don't know. We don't like to script these out because they don't sound conversational then. But one of the reasons that we thought we could be competitive in the ammo space in non-Weatherby cartridges is because I feel like we've gotten pretty good, and by good I mean like really consistent with our loading. So can you walk us through our process? What do we do? What do you guys do that makes our ammo consistent and just good?
So a lot of it comes down to, so we've got the components that we've got. A lot of it comes down to fine tuning like your powder charge or an overall length, and setting up the machine correctly to be consistent every time that head comes down to press a bullet in. It's doing it exactly the same every time. The non-Weatherby cartridges presented kind of a fun challenge because we didn't have any preset notions of what we were going to be doing, what velocities we were going to hit. I came into the whole thing wanting to make the most accurate and consistent ammo more than trying to push the barrier on having the fastest cartridge out there. So when we're talking about loading out on the machines, dialing in powder to where your deviation between drop charges is very, very low, and fine-tuning neck tension, which is another thing. Like hand loaders will get really in the weeds about like, oh, you've got to have 2 thousandths neck tension. We are really checking all those things, all those boxes. The standard deviation of these rounds, we're aiming for 10 or less. We want this ammo to be the most consistent ammo that you can buy.
When you say 10 or less, explain what that means.
So you've got kind of two metrics of looking at velocity and pressure spread. So you have an extreme spread, which is from highest to lowest within a given group.
Right.
And then standard deviation is basically a mean average of all of the rounds fired. So if you're talking like a standard deviation of 10 on a 10-shot string, you may have an extreme spread of 30 feet per second, if not less. So out at long range, you're going to see less vertical dispersion because that SD is so low. You can imagine at 1,000 yards, if one round was 50 feet per second slower, it may hit just a little bit lower. So we're trying to eliminate those variables.
It's pretty awesome. And you guys have done a really good job. I've taken our process, we load and then we sort, and then the stuff that has some nicks and dings, we call out, as we call them seconds. And that's usually what we use for our own marketing and internal testing. I've taken boxes marked seconds, and I'm down in the range getting a gun set up, and I've had like incredibly low extreme spreads, even like 7 across 5 shots, like 7 FPS.
Yeah.
From high to low on 5 shots on our seconds. I was like, holy cow! Now that was probably really exceptional, but it's pretty awesome.
That's really honestly not uncommon. I hit an extreme spread of 2 last week, which was something I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is pretty absurd, but
yeah, and we're not guaranteeing an extreme spread. We don't have that in any of our warranty or any other verbiage, but just the fact that we're seeing those kinds of things are really good. Tyler, you probably know this too. We get guys to come to talk to us at trade shows all the time, especially the consumer shows, where they're like, man, I've been trying to hand load for my 300 Weatherby, and I just can't get better than the factory. And we're like, well, what are you getting with the factory? They're like, well, I've got about like a 1/2-inch gun. I'm like, I'm not real sure what you're trying to improve upon there then, because he's like, yeah, I can't really get it. All my hand loads are like 1 inch. I'm like,
maybe you should buy it.
yeah, I would just keep buying our ammo.
Save you some time. Maybe go pick up another hobby. I don't know.
I just think that the process that Keaton and the ammo team have created in our shop here is like it's basically you're taking a hand loader's approach to production loading, and we don't load hundreds of millions of rounds like the big guys do, but we load a lot, especially when you start talking about if we just measured powder, like how many grains of powder we load, that'd be a big number.
It is quite a large number.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm just really been impressed with our consistency in our loading and the confidence that I have when I go on a hunt or when we go to a rider's event, and I'm like, this gun works, just shoot it, pull the trigger, it's going to be great. And they're like, holy moly, I just stacked 2 on top of each other at 500 yards. It's pretty cool.
And it's kind of a testament to, I guess, the team down there, too. They take a lot of pride in making sure that what they're making is coming off the machine very consistently. You could have someone in there that maybe doesn't care as much. Our team does, though. We're really focusing on these little things. Our core group is hunters, and when you're out in the field, those shots really count. It's not ringing steel at 1,000 yards. If you miss, you miss. An animal, we've got to have this stuff dialed.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of the approach we take when we're making this ammo. Whereas like temp stability as well, all those little factors. When you out in the field, this ammo is going to be the same on this day as it is the next.
You mentioned neck tension earlier. Why does that matter so much? Like, what's the difference?
So we do what's called a push and a pull test. So on your push test, that's going to really relate to a high recoiling.
You're like pushing the bullet into the case.
Yeah, we're measuring the amount of force it takes to push the bullet to get it to move.
Okay.
So what that's doing is when you fire a high recoiling rifle, that bullet is
like
going to slam.
28 Nosler or 300 Weatherby.
Something snappy.
Right.
That bullet slams into the front of the mag box. So you can imagine if you have a really low push test that bullet could seat into the case a little bit. It could cause an overpressure or it could cause inaccuracies, and we don't want either of those.
We fought that a lot in our development of 338 RPM, right?
Yeah, there was kind of some issues there when you're talking about a very large bullet in a smaller case like that.
Yeah.
Getting everything lined up perfectly was kind of a challenge, but worked out in the end.
Yep.
Consistency. Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
No,
but
you're good.
Consistency too, like with neck tension. So there's something to, kind of think about. Like it's essentially like a champagne bottle. Think of like the cartridge as a champagne bottle. So that, as a powder starts to burn, and as that starts to expand, that's basically popping that cork. And as that expands and then it hits the lands and then is building more pressure and then pushes that bullet out, you want that process to be extremely consistent across the board. So if you have wildly varying neck tensions, you will have wild velocities and things like that. So because when it comes down to powder burning, you basically have, what affects your burn rate is, your geometry, your composition, but the biggest and probably the biggest one is pressure. So your pressure, as long as that's consistent throughout your firing process, you'll get good consistency in your burn rate and pressure.
And a big part of that's like engraving speed. Let's say I could just grab this bullet right here and pull it out with my fingers. You
Yeah.
imagine the initial explosion from the primer and that powder starts igniting. And
It's
that
already
bullet wants to
jumped.
leave.
Yeah.
Well, it's left and hit the lands, and now it's stopped. If you can hold that back for a little bit till that pressure starts to build, that bullet has an initial speed to hit the lands with enough pressure to engrave it. If you have a bullet that you can just pull out of the case, you could have a bullet slams in the lands and have a high pressure event because of that.
Yeah.
So it's not so much. We look at it as a safety standpoint, number one.
Sure.
Anything we do out there, safety first, and then we're looking at quality. And like Jared said, consistency with that neck tension is going to lead to better accuracy, better extreme spread, better standard deviation, just a better overall cartridge.
Makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Quick question on like thought process too. How many iterations are you going through when you're like saying, okay, we're gonna load the 139s and the 280 active? Like how many iterations of like test ammo are you doing there? Like maybe walk us through like how much goes into the development part too.
So initially, if I have no idea, I don't have any data on this cartridge, I'm going to just start by trying out multiple different powders. I'm going to go through the myriad and find out which one of those throughout kind of a ladder test up to pressure is going to give me the best results. It's going to give me low deviation. Then I'm going to move on to accuracy. Once I've kind of found some powders that fit the spectrum that I'm looking for, I'm going to make sure that powder is accurate. You could have two powders that hit the exact same speed with the exact same pressure, and one is wildly more accurate than the other one. So that was really fun to do with all these non-Weatherbys, is actually really tailoring the cartridge to certain powders, different overall lengths. You're going to play around with that a little. And then after that, I'm going to move on to temp testing. That's a really important one for me, especially guys going out in the field. You don't want a cartridge that's 100 feet per second slower in October than it was in July. So
it's a real thing.
You know, we have a pretty good idea on a lot of our favorite powders that we use that they are going to be temp stable. Yeah, I'm going to move through that process. If I run into any hiccups, that's where stuff really gets fun.
So on your first powder process, when you're just trying different powders, like 10, 20, 100, like how many iterations?
Oh, how many shots? Like individual shots are you talking about, or?
Like charge weights and things
Yeah,
like that.
like how many different versions are you testing?
So a lot of times I like to start on a baseline. I'm going to work up to, let's say the max average pressure is 65,000 PSI. I obviously don't want to run at 65,000 PSI. I could probably do it hand loading, but we have to have something that we can load down there. And you're going to have variation a little bit in pressure. Pressure is one that I have to look at, and we have to abide by those SAMI standards. So I'll probably work it up to like 60,000 PSI, really safe spot. And then from there, I'm going to shoot that. If it's accurate and I got lucky, I'm going to start moving either side of that, maybe half a grain just to see what it does. If a charge jumps a bunch in a half a grain one way or the other, I know that I'm kind of in the middle of what you would call a node. And you want to be on that flat peak. If you were to load develop a cartridge, let's say you took this cartridge and
That's
put
6.5 PRC.
Yeah, 130 Scirocco 6.5 PRC here. If I put 65 grains in that, and this is just all hypothetical, and I worked up half grain increments all the way up to 70,
Okay.
I'm going to chart that, and you will see it will come up in waves, and then it will plateau off. And for maybe a grain, I don't gain any pressure, I don't gain any velocity. I know that's a good node to probably be on. And if it's accurate there, all the better as well, because then my powder could swing a tenth or two each way, which, you know, happens on a loading machine. Anyone who's ever run an old school powder drop knows that your powder's going to vary a little bit.
Sure.
I know that won't move my charge. It won't move my pressure. It won't move my velocity. So I'll kind of do that kind of stuff. Mainly, I've got to find something that's accurate first. I've got to find a charge weight that's going to give me accuracy. I kind of have a notion of what velocity that I'm aiming for. We looked around the market a lot and tried to stay competitive with everybody, but not forgetting that we're trying to make the best, most accurate, best standard deviation cartridge that we could. So as far as iterations, I could spend a week on one cartridge, or I could spend a day. It just really depends on how lucky I get
How
on that
fast you
initial
get.
loading.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you're all doing that on a P&V barrel, correct?
Yep.
So the difference between like him and a hand loader's checking for like pressure signs, like, oh, is the, primer pocket loosening or whatever else. All this done on a P&V barrel is you get all the data.
We know the exact chamber pressure.
Exact.
Every shot.
Yeah. And down to like
P&V stands for pressure and velocity.
Yeah. So and then it's not like, oh, this is your max pressure. It's like, this is your pressure curve. This is how it goes throughout the shot cycle. So it's pretty cool.
That's interesting. So cartridge overall length a little bit. So the 6.5 PRC with the hammer and is that the 300 PRC?
This is the 7. Right?
So-
Oh, that's the 7. Yeah. Well, yeah, and the 300's like that. We don't have one out, but like you can see a lot of the bullet with the hammer bullets.
Oh, hammer bullet. Yeah.
You can see a couple of the annular rings around there. So why'd we load those bullets out further?
So the PRCs are actually really fun because when Hornady designed that case, they gave us a lot of room for these heavy high BC projectiles. That's kind of what it was designed for. Unlike like the 280 Ackley and the Nosler, the Nosler's kind of just a speed demon. You might shoot a lighter bullet out of that thing than you would like the PRCs. So basically what I wound up on there
7 PRC.
on the 7 PRC. So with these hammers, they have these bands, and those were by design meant to lower the bearing surface, but they also make a very good cantilever. And a cantilever is just an area in which you crimp the end of the neck into so that your bullet doesn't get pushed into the case inadvertently. It's kind of an extra safety step there.
Yep.
It's a way to normalize neck tension a little bit. So what I landed on there was I could push that bullet out. I know exactly how far off the lands I am with the ogive on this bullet, and it just happened to land in that band right there. So we're crimping into the center of it.
Yeah.
So we've got a pretty good idea how far off the lands we needed to be. And hammers, in general, just aren't picky on overall length. I could probably seat that bullet all the way in, and it will shoot. I could jump it out and touch the lens with it, and it'll shoot. It's super easy.
Not a paid partnership with a hammer there by you, right, Keaton?
No, not at all.
That's what, he keeps saying that,
You guys
but I'm
keep saying
not.
it, but I'm waiting for this
Sir.
check to come in. So
Brian?
Shout out.
Yeah, I think having, not that this matters at all, but having the bullet stick out a little bit further is it looks cool. So
You'll
that's,
also-
that's a thing.
Looks pretty
you'll
neat.
gain some velocity because you can imagine if I had to shove that bullet down into the case, the more bullet I put in there, the less space there is in that case.
Right.
So if I can jump that bullet out some and gain some case capacity, I've also got a little more room to play for velocity.
It's awesome. What are we missing on the loaded cartridges?
We should talk too a little bit about the 280 AI. Like we didn't touch that too much, but if people don't know what that is, so just like so it's a 280 Rem, right, which was Remington's attempt to dislodge the 270 Winchester. They're like, oh, we'll launch this we'll one up the caliber from a 277 to a 284, and there you go. Well, P.O. Ackley improved that, and I mean I think now you see way more 280 AI than you do 280 Rem, which is kind of crazy. That a Wildcat off of a cartridge is more popular.
He won up
than
the one up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't triple stamp a double stamp. This
Yeah.
time,
Cool
Ackley
thing.
can.
I would say cool thing about 280 Ackley too. If you're a Mark V user, it fits in our 6 lug.
Yeah, so we started really loading, chambering a 280 Ackley when we really started with the backcountry line, and we wanted a lightweight 7. We had the 6.5 RPM that came with our backcountry line, and we're like, you know what? Ballistically, we can't do much more with the RPM case than what the 280 Ackley already is. So we just started loading or chambering the 280 Ackley in the backcountry, and it's been really popular.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and ballistically, I mean, you couldn't put a 7 Rem mag in that 6 lug. Just looking at the 280 Ackley improved, it's a very unassuming cartridge. But by design, having less taper on the body and more taper on the shoulder, giving it more case capacity over the 280 Remington, it really comes in swinging against a 7 Rem mag, to be honest with you. It's not that far off of it, and it's a lot less case capacity, which makes it impressive. It kind of reminds me of our 330 at RPM.
Yeah.
You look at that thing, it's very unassuming, even though it has a 338 bullet shoved into the end of
Well,
it.
it doesn't look like a 338, 378. We're
It
like,
doesn't,
that thing's
no.
a beast.
But it competes with any of the big 338s out there very easily with less case capacity. That's kind of what the 280 Ackley aims for.
Yeah. So really, to some level, we've got some level of intrigue with all of these cartridges. All 5 of these non-Weatherbys, the 3 PRCs, the 28 Nosler, and the 280 Ackley, and we saw that there was probably a gap in the market, either from a projectile standpoint or from just overall availability. So these first 5 offerings, we've got basically a hammer, a Sirocco, and then we've got some more bullet offerings coming later, but we've got the 156 Burger coming now. So from a timing perspective, basically in August, the 6.5 PRCs will be shipping, all the ones that we talked about. The 300 PRC is available now. The 280 Ackley hammer is available now. And then as we get into late August and into September, then we'll have the 7 PRC, the 28 Nosler, and the Sirocco and the 280 Ackley. So there's about half of them are available now, and the other half are coming a little bit later. Plus what's available now for people that have been looking for but can't find is brass.
Yeah, that's going to be pretty exciting. We got 280 Ackley, 28 Nosler, and 300 PRC brass all available right now. So it will be
50 count packs.
Yeah, the 280 Ackley was one of those things where it's like, oh, let's find some comparables on the market, and it's like
There's
there's no
literally
comparables.
none.
There's yeah.
Yeah, we get on AmmoSeek a lot just to make sure that we're competitive or to see what else is available out there. And like 280 Ackley and 28 Nosler, like there's literally nothing.
Yeah.
So until now, go check out weatherby.com if you want to learn any more. Keaton, is there anything you were like hoping that we would ask you? I'd be like, I really wanted to talk about how awesome I am at this. This is your chance.
Well, I mean, for me, this one is so much different than what I do every day with the Weatherbys. We've got a tried and true cartridge with all the Weatherbys. I'm mainly aiming for like a velocity. Of course, I'm looking at accuracy more, but to start from base level on these cartridges and be able to kind of develop some of the criteria in which we judge these cartridges off of was super fun. There was no base to stand on when I started on these.
Sure.
It kind of reminded me of when I started hand loading when I was in high school, and it kind of reminded me of that, not knowing what I'm doing, kind of going into it with a fresh perspective and trying to make the best product possible with all the knowledge that I've gained over the years.
It's kind of like a house, sometimes it's just easier to build a new house than it is to like do a remodel.
Yep.
And I've seen you and John when we're like, we can't get a specific powder that we really like, and we're like, we'll just get the same performance out of a different powder, and you guys are like, it doesn't really work like that. So having no prior target, I could see how that's huge, because on 78, almost 79 years of history for Weatherby, that you're like, well, the 257 Weatherby 100 whatever has to be this velocity. It's been the same for a whole lot of years. We're not going to change it now. And so that has created some challenges. And sometimes we have had to adjust our box velocity, which you could pretty well always trust our box velocity. It's the right thing. So
Yep.
That's like legitimate velocities, not like speculative, like, well, if it's 100 degrees fired off of Mount Everest and pointing downhill, like legitimate. I think there's some people who are, some manufacturers out there that aren't quite as honest.
And
So.
I will say here, we are advertising this all in a 24-inch barrel. That's actually the SAMI approved test barrel length that we have to use.
Yep.
There's some people that will put 26 and they kind of juice up the numbers, although they probably tested it lower in a 24-inch barrel. But all these velocities that we have here and that are on the website, those are tested in a 24, and those are true to 24 velocities. So if you have a 26-inch gun, you're going to get a little bit more speed out of that. But this is what it's tested at, and that is true. And we're really competitive with some of the guys out there throwing 26-inch barrel test standards on their boxes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna bite my tongue because I was about to like start calling people out. I'm not gonna do that. Thanks for coming on and representing the overall Weatherby ammo team, because I know you personally had a lot to do with this, but then there's John and Kevin and Alex and Caden. And
there's a lot goes into it.
There's a lot of people that are behind making this stuff pretty awesome. So we're really proud to offer this. And if you liked what we had to say, or you've been looking for any of these cartridges or these projectiles loaded from a reputable factory like Weatherby, jump on weatherby.com and go check it out. Like we said, about half of these are available to ship today. That's it.
That's all I got. Yeah, I don't got anything else.